It was a burst artery in the midsection.
It was a burst artery in the midsection, and you were at...
Yeah, next to the aorta.
Were you conscious when it happened? I mean, take me through that and the sort of the... Were you...
I was doing shows. I was doing... I do a charity show every 3 years in my hometown of Aurelia for various things, and it varies. I was up there I got the Friday night in, and I didn't feel good. So I drove back to Toronto. I just commute when I do these things. I don't bother staying in a hotel up there. Came back, got up Saturday morning. My wife said, don't go. And I said, I'm going anyway. I got a show to do. So I drove up there again on the Saturday, and by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I was on the floor. I was on the floor, and I couldn't get up. And that's how... And they took me to emergency in Aurelia, and they gave me a hypodermic needle. I said, I got a concert tonight, and the nurse said, you're not going anywhere. and just feature this. From that point on, I did not wake up until 6 weeks later. I was totally unconscious for 6 weeks, and in the hospital for 3.5 months. The first time.
Wow.
I had to go back a second time and heal, and I had to go back a third time. And that whole process took 19 months to get through that. And while that was going on, I was working on the album, the Harmony album, by having the boys overdub parts in the recording studio while I was still in the hospital, using those old practice tapes. That's why, getting back to why I said it was underproduced, you see, if we would have got a chance to really get a real fair shot at these tunes, they would have been great. Everything was all rehearsed. We were ready to go. We had to cancel 24 shows. Right there and then.
You were in a coma for
6 weeks.
6 weeks.
Yeah. I was cold.
Do you remember coming out?
I don't remember anything. All I remember is no worries, no cares.
Right. That's beautiful. It was kind of blissful almost.
Yeah. Had a few hallucinations waking up. It was due to epidurals. It was due to a morphine button. I did some of the craziest things. I thought somebody was doing a hold up at the nursing station outside my bed one day, and I dialed 911 on my telephone. And I had about 4 doctors standing in my room within about...
You were in the right place.
35 seconds.
Honey, I'll take you out on the town, feeling just right. We're going high stepping tonight. Oh, you work so hard, yes, I know you do. When the work's all done and the week is through, we're gonna pick up our heels. We're going high stepping tonight. Welcome back inside the Parisi Palace, high above 2919 East Broadway. This is hour number 2 of the Jake Feinberg Show. We just heard from a legendary Canadian poet rocker, Gordon Lightfoot. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And it's an honor for me to introduce an unheralded musical icon in our society, a guy, a multi-instrumentalist, and he's been playing in bands for the last 4 or 5 decades. Marty Grebb, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you so much for having me. Honored to be here.
No, it's an honor to talk to you, man. I was hoping you could paint the picture a little bit for my generation and younger generations about the street scene in Chicago and how if I'm right or wrong, about the fact that the music was really played in the streets and in the clubs, and you talk a little bit about that.
Well, a lot of that is gone. My father and mother were both musicians. My dad passed away. My mom is 92. But so I was around a lot of it, and also there were no racial barriers in my own particular family, because in musical senses, especially in the jazz world at that time, not as much in other music scenes. There was still a lot of racism, but in the jazz world, those borders had been stepped over big time already. You know, in the Oh, man, I don't know, probably even in the 20s, you know?
Sure.
But by the time my dad's era, which was more the 40s and late 30s, that was all said and done. So that was not an issue, and I got to hear more of that music, and consequently in more of places where that was likely to happen. And, you know, down by Roosevelt Road, there were people out playing blues on the sidewalk, and Muddy Waters was one of them. You know, I mean, I did not see that personally. I did not meet Muddy Waters until I was a teenager, and then I ended up playing opposite him, and Pine Top Perkins was one of my teachers, but I've had so many teachers. You learn things from everybody if you get smart enough to do it.
Can you talk? I mean, spend a moment talking about. I cannot believe you got mentored by Pine Top. Can you just spend a moment talking about Pine Top?
Well, yeah. I mean, when we say mentored, it was sort of more of an off-the-cuff thing where we were friends. And the reason that was mostly was because at a young age, I happened to fall into a scene where the band I was with was signed by VJ Records. I was 16 then. And I'd heard a lot of the music already because my father would be playing jump blues and different things and all kinds of stuff. He had 78s that were loaded with everything from the 4 to that, you know, all kinds of different music. So it was just kind of a association by accident, like by me going to Chess or VJ and then getting signed by VJ with Peter Cetera was in my band. We went to high school together, and he was a year older than me. We had a band called The Exceptions. Cal David was another guy who was in it. We had a drummer who switched to a drummer who sang, and then we switched guitarists to Jim Vincent. There's all these connections of people, but through all that, you know, that's how I met Paul Butterfield. He was like a blues hound like me, and he was hounding those places, and I ended up lip-syncing a record that we had made on VJ Records at a place called Budland, which there were no white people in it except us, and we got to be the Dells' backup band. That's where it came. That was the big hit. Once that happened, I met everybody, because the Dells took us everywhere, and I ended up playing at places called the Tri-State Inn, like that, where it's, you know, 11 o'clock at night, and there's a guy outside the door leaning against the building with sunglasses on with a gun under his vest, you know?
Hey, I want to
and it's a dirt floor,
right,
and there's alcohol by the glass, no ice, and it's us and the Dells on stage. And, you know, through those connections, I met everybody. I met Etta James, you know, who I got to work with then and later in life, and I got to meet Ray Charles through her, and I met everybody. It came back around. You know what I mean? I ended up doing arranging for Otis Rush and Buddy Guy, and Paul Butterfield was in Woodstock. All of those connections, I'm going to say, pretty much are spiritual and God-guided in my estimation.
Can you go?
You know, the openness that spirituality brings. If you hear Pentecostal music and blues, you go, wait a minute, there is some correlation here.
Absolutely.
You know, these people are having way too much fun in church from the fun I'm having. I'm hearing Gregorian chants. I'm hearing that stuff, and they're grooving. They're jumping around and rocking and having a good time, and that's their celebration of life and the spirituality of that. I'm seeing my father up on stages playing, and he's having a great time, and he's closing his eyes, and he's playing and all that. So there's all these connections, and my connection with Pine Top was partly that. It was that brotherhood and that respect for, you know, he saw I was a young player. I was playing a certain amount, and And I had an organ. He didn't. He wanted to play my organ. We would switch off, playing sometimes at these varying places and denizens, places that we would play at. And through him, I got to meet a lot of other people and got safely guided into clubs where otherwise it might have been dangerous for me to be.
Marty, I wanted to go back for a minute. Did you get a chance to go down to Maxwell Street and see the blind dobro players playing?
Yes, I did. And Maxwell Street, when I said Roosevelt Road, that was around that area, Maxwell Street. And that's also where all the bands, like mine, which was The Exceptions, and that was the one with Peter Cetera, we were the best well-known white band in Chicago in those days, in the mid-'60s. We were it. We were the highest paid and the most well-known because we could sing a lot of harmony singing, and part of that was very influenced by the Dells. It was also influenced by other people like the Beach Boys and the Beatles and different things, but by the time the Beatles came out, I was going, well, geez, man, these guys are good, and I fell in love with them eventually. But they really put a damper on blues and rhythm and blues because their record sales went through the roof, and the stand-up and deliver singers like Jerry Butler or even Marvin Gaye or whoever you want to say are the blues singers, you heard less and less about them. So the Maxwell Street thing, yeah, that's where Muddy Waters was. That's where a lot of people was. Yes, did I ever get a chance to hear Blind Lemon Jefferson? No, only on recordings. Did I ever get to meet him? No, but I did get to meet a lot of those people. I got to stand on stage with Jimmy Reed. I got to, see the crossovers. Levon Helm was friends with Leon Russell, who I eventually met. But I knew about Leon Russell through other people in local bands.
Right.
And I played in Tulsa, Oklahoma in clubs, and people were coming up to me, Jesse Ed Davis, oh, I like what you're playing, da-da-da-da-da. All these path crossings were huge. I met a guy named Mike Finnegan, who was on his first date with his wife in a club in Wichita, Kansas, coming to see my band. He's been my friend for the rest of my life. He played with Jimi Hendrix. He plays now with Bonnie Raitt, whose band I used to be in. But we've known each other forever. So there's a lot of connection, and it's not happenstance. It's not accidental. It's really my path and my destiny in life. And I know it to be true.
How long did it take you to understand that? I mean, is it only through perspective, or did you recognize that this was a spiritual undertaking at that time?
It took me too long.
That's okay, though. I mean, you're still here,
Partly, I will announce and not support the idea of. But I was an LSD guy, and my spirituality expanded a lot because of that, because the nature of it and hearing A Love Supreme, John Coltrane's recording, and hearing Bob Dylan's lyrics, I knew there was other people that were doing, those types of experimentations. If you hear Bob Dylan's song, the chimes of freedom and the chimes of freedom are flashing in there, and the stuff he's talking about, that's about spirituality. And so around that time, I would say, is when I sort of became more of a recovering Catholic, so to speak.
Can you, Marty?
My God expanded into more of a universal connection with music and everything and everybody, and I went, I see. Oh, I see. The brotherhood of the music is opening me up to all this other stuff, and that was very important. And then I started to notice and look for and pay attention to when I was getting those shoulder taps, Before that, I probably did not. I was too immature and young too interested in, this girl's mini skirt or whatever the thing was. A lot of us start playing music because we want to get girls.
Listen,
I came from a musical family. I was lucky. It wasn't for only those reasons. And I knew from the time I was 12 that I was going to play music. I couldn't do anything else.
Talking to Marty Grebb here. Already he's just on fire. Can you please, for the audience, talk about the fusing of spirituality with psychedelics? I think this is absolutely imperative as we move into the 21st century. The idea of a larger acceptance of God and not as part of a monotheistic religion.
Yeah, I think we can correlate that right now with what's going on in the world, and we can say guys like Eckhart Tolle, who had a spiritual awakening sitting on a park bench that had nothing to do with anything involving drugs,
right.
But he had a similar one to the one that I had, where I was up at my family's property in Wisconsin, looking at a river of lights. I never saw no pink elephants or, any stuff like that. Anything that did for me was always spiritual. I wasn't somebody that was, I feel so stoned, that's it. I laughed because things were funny, but I also felt connected. I felt these big connections, and it made my playing change. I would never disrespect that or advise any children or any young kids to do it. I would certainly advise everybody to stay as far away from alcohol or drugs that are damaging or not enlightening, or it helps nothing. It goes nowhere. It blocks you from playing well. A lot of people think they can play better behind a lot of booze. I'm looser, but to me they're sloppier. One such guy that I know, Stevie Ray Vaughan. I was friends with him. He used to bring me up on stage, and big changes in his life. He got to a spiritual place and got away from the very popular thing that was going on back in the 70s. People, the hippie generation was destroyed by the blast of cocaine that came on the scene and blunted art, I think.
You're
and,
darn right.
People,
you're darn right, yeah.
Faster is better, and we're all jacked up and all this stuff. That really discouraged art,
I agree. I
Jimi
completely
Hendrix,
agree.
I got a chance to meet him many times because he used to hang out at Ondine in New York City, and I talked to him about all that stuff, and he was a very gentle soul, as was another great friend of mine, Richard Manuel, probably the most gentle soul I've ever met in my life. Or Leon Russell. Let's talk. There's a guy who is, he has a new film out that was made in 1974 called A Poem is a Naked Person, which is a Bob Dylan line, and he named it that because he has such deep, abiding respect for Bob Dylan and says he's the greatest American writer of all time, which I believe. Those guys, still talk a bit, but they're both so shy in a way that you can see them standing in a room kind of waiting for who's going to say the next word. I've had that experience, and it's, Leon's a very shy person that he gets out on stage and he's a dynamo, and he's a genius too. And I think he's written genius lyrics in his lifetime. And he writes what are called true songs. He says, Marty, I write all this other stuff, and some of my lyrics say, I wrote a song, I made some bad rhyme, and that's true. And the best songs I write are true. So there you go,
Marty.
Isn't that spiritual in a way?
Well, I just feel like we're just easing into the bottom of the second inning here. I wanted to. We have a game on this program called Name That Tune. I'm going to put it in for you. I want you to take a listen to it, and we'll come back and break it down. Okay?
All right.
Hospital, the Circle Tree Ranch, and Abbott Taylor Jewelers, and we thank them for their support. All right, Mr. Grebb, what do you got for us, brother?
Well, that's what a wonderful thing we have that I co-wrote with my buddy partner in that band, Harvey Brooks.
Oh, yeah. I got to tell you, that when I mean, I've been playing that for my daughters relentlessly. I had found it on vinyl. I guess it was the Eagle, the Outlook Eagle House. You guys epitomized this regional music. I mean, I can tell between Cal David, Greg Thomas, Harvey, and yourself that this was one of those musical enclaves that manifested itself in the early 70s prior to the blunting of authentic music by cocaine. You guys were living in a house together. You were playing together. Please break down that period of music, because you can hear all that soul built into, I mean, you just were the perfect example of guys that were playing blues and rock with jazz aesthetics. And I just wanted you to talk about the love that you guys brought into that to make those albums so rich.
Well, that was a live brotherhood. That band at that time was a live brotherhood. It eventually turned into a dead brotherhood, but at the time period that you're referring to, exactly right. Let's also mention the name Dino Andino,
Thank you.
Cuban percussionist, who was part of that group, and added that flavor to that. And those personalities were powerful. Plus, Michael Lang, the promoter and main force behind the Woodstock Festival, was our manager and record company. He had just had a lot of money thrown at him by Gulf and Western to start Just Sunshine Records. So there we were at Eagle Mountain House is the name of the place.
Thank you.
I happened to, oddly, the band I'm in now, The Wait, was formed by me going back and playing at a private party there a few years back because I'd been working with Garth Hudson, and I met up with Jim Weeder.
Oh my God! Wait, the Eagle Mountain House. That's not Levon's barn. This house is different.
Yes. It's far from. It's maybe 45 minutes away from Woodstock.
This is unbelievable.
Up in a place called Big Indian.
Sure.
But anyway, at that time, yeah, that was an old hotel that was built in the 20s. A very small, if you can picture it. There's probably pictures of it online if you want to see it, but it's on the album cover if it's possible to get that anywhere and look at it. It's difficult to find.
No, I have 3 copies of it, so it's out there.
Yeah, so exactly right. We had a room set up that was formerly the living room of the hotel, which was for all the guests, which probably were only about maybe 15 rooms. That's how big the hotel was. Sure. And all surrounding the front of the building was a porch, and for isolation purposes, next to the window, we built a room, and we pushed a piano into there and walled it off and insulated it and put a space heater in it, and that's where my piano was. And that piano was given to me to use by Garth Hudson, who I had not even met yet.
Oh my God! He just
sent it over because he heard I needed one, and I knew the other guys in the band, and so that's how I met him, and that friendship has been ongoing ever since then, and I eventually got to be in his band for a short time. He only has had a band for a short time ever in his life. The Garth Hudson band was only for a very short period. But anyway, so there I am, and we're in this place, and every day. And I'll be honest about this because I feel like I need to be. So if there's people listening that will go off in the wrong direction, maybe they'll rethink it. Because at that time, some of the best, Michael was kind of a target figure. So many people wanted to talk to him, be next to him, and all that stuff, that he would get handed all sorts of party favors, including green ones, and then we'd get this stuff from South America and get some good ideas maybe, but get no work done. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, I'm following you every way.
That was good in its certain way, but we finally realized what really needs to happen is to get work done. So how do you get it done? Well, you get in a room together and you hash it out, and then 2 guys go off and they write a song the next day or the next night, and you bring it in and you go over it and all that sort of stuff. That first album of the Rhinestones, that's what that is the result of a brotherhood that was working at that time. how many brotherhoods can we talk about that have dissolved? I would say almost 85%.
Well, that's
Even the
part of. I
Everly
mean, that's
Brothers,
part of.
Or, you know,
yeah.
how many, the group Chicago, which was a great band that I got to be in for a while. I mean, there's only 4 guys left in that band. I played with Danny Seraphin a few months back, who's playing the Bee Jesus out of those drums. And you know, brotherhoods kind of have a tendency to fall by the wayside sometimes for whatever reason. This guy gets an idea, he can't work with that guy. Oh, I don't like the way you said this so many times, or I can't take that joke. Whatever it is, it seems to bother somebody and things change, you know. But our opening acts at that point in time of the Rhinestones, 2 of them were the Eagles and the Doobie Brothers.
Right.
They were opening for us, and we were opening for bands like Sly and the Family Stone, and I got to see some first-hand stuff of his condition, which also helped clear me up a bit. But it was a while until I really cleared up. It takes time for you to see what's most important, you know. And I feel about music now like I did when I was 13, but I had to get all that other stuff out of the way. So
I wanted to talk to you. I had Ronnie Hawkins on live on the Jake Feinberg show last weekend, and he talked about you know, putting together the band with Levon, and really Garth was such a pivotal person, because when Richard came in, he really wasn't that great a piano player, and Garth really had a jazz band, classical band, and he had such a chops as it related to arrangements and just knowledge. And I would like you to talk about Garth Hudson's not just what he's meant to you. Obviously, he's a special person. You played with him, but talk about some of the intangibles and his legacy as it relates to you know, regional North American music.
Well, a few things I can say about that is probably, let's say, guys like Garth Hudson, Leon Russell, Bob Dylan, maybe J.J. Cale. There are a few that I've met who really do not live in the same space and time or planet that the rest of us do. They're different human beings, and they're really in another place. That's how it feels to me anyway. Richard Manuel and Garth Hudson, I would have to say that the truth of that is, it's a misnomer to say that Richard was not that good of a player. He was just gifted with what his gifts were, like anybody else. My father used to tell me that, you know. Albert Einstein, 90% perspiration, 10% inspiration. There's your genius. So you gotta put the work in on wherever your shortcomings are. I was blessed with a lot of stuff. I had to work my ass off to be a really good singer, but I was surrounded by people who were. That helped. Garth Hudson and Richard Manuel, what a team. Garth, you know, a genius at his understanding and knowledge of so many types of music, including jazz, and I think what he calls the priest of 52nd Street. He has some term he uses. We'll never know a lot of things about Garth because he's so deep. He invited me to breakfast when I used to live in Woodstock back in the day. Sat me down and he showed me about 10 or 15 composition books, which were filled with what? They were filled with every great piano solo, the label, the date of the session, who was on the date, everything like that. I said, Garth, man, this stuff should be out in a book. Oh, well, someday, Marty, I'm going to put it out in a book. I may do that. And, you know, he said, the way he talks and the way he plays are two different things. But the Richard Manuel thing, now, Richard's talent, he was a great rhythmic sense. He did get stuff from Garth, but he knew all about inversions and different things and gospel leading tones and gospel chords in his own way. Different than Leon Russell. I mean, Leon Russell knows more about that than anyone I've ever worked with. The Pentecostal Church of God in Christ, he stole them lines. He plays all of that, and he put that in his music as much as Ray Charles did in his own way. Leon took that, and he made Southern rock out of that, I think. That's my opinion. And he's left-handed, and that's part of what his mystique is, and it made him play a certain way. And Garth, and Leon had polio when he was a kid, and he had to struggle through that. It was very hard for him and he had some family issues that's too personal for me to say. I don't want to say that. And Garth had some issues with his health, and it made it difficult for him, and he fought through that. Maybe that's part of what comes with the dinner. Maybe you have to be a little this or that, or maybe, like in Richard's case, you have to suffer somewhat through certain things to acquire the genius state or place. I mean, you can't get through life without living. I know that.
Well, Marty,
unless you're hiding out, and then you didn't do anything anyway.
Yeah, I just want to be clear, and we'll pick this up in part two, but it was in '64, and what you just said is exactly correct. Garth worked every day for 2 hours with Richard. Richard worked 2 hours every day on his own, and the band would play 2 hours every night. And within a year, he was really, really strong. I'm not trying to say that Richard came up short. I'm saying when the Hawks first formed, it was pretty. It was just a revelation to hear that. And Marty, I want to tell you, we have a lot more to get to because, I mean, you are not just a person of philosophy, but somebody who's interacted with a lot of great cats, and I look forward to picking up this interview with you and